Welcome to the Aether, and welcome to Scorpio season. Today I'm joined by author, illustrator, and researcher Mike Clelland, whose book, The Messengers, explores the strange connections between owls, UFO contact experiences, and synchronicity. This is a long, layered conversation that means a lot, both personally and to the unfolding arc of this podcast, so I'll keep the intro short. But true to form, like clockwork, back-to-back owl sightings bookending our interview. Because, of course there were. This is my conversation with Mike Clelland. Let's get into it. I want to know about sort of the inception of the owl research that you've started doing, your confirmation event on March 10th, 2013. And really just the process of making the book, what has evolved out of this book, and let's just kind of start getting into The Messengers because it was so profound for me.
And you just finished it.
Just finished it.
Wow.
I was listening. I don't know if you can tell in one of those videos of the owls last night. It's playing in my AirPods that were in my pocket because I heard the hoot.
You were listening to the audiobook.
While
Wow,
I saw the owls.
This is more normal than I can even put into words. This is so normal. I mean, I get this. I get this almost every day.
You spoke about that right in the book too. Today I'm listening. I'm like, oh, it's happened probably 20 or 25 times or something you mentioned in the book that people have seen owls while they're listening to your work.
It's unending. It's just, or just before coming out. A podcast hosts the night before a podcast, seeing an owl for the first time is I would say, I got to be careful because I'm making these numbers up, but statistically, I mean, I do podcasts 2 or 3 times a month. I just say yes to people, and then I'd say close to half the people I do podcasts with see an owl or hear an owl the night before the podcast.
And Mike,
or right after they finish the podcast.
I knew it. I'll tell you real quick. I went viral on Threads yesterday for my spoon bending experience that I made an episode about. I went.
I've done it. I've done that too, and I'm almost afraid to try again because I don't want to jinx it. Yeah,
I am afraid to try again. So, I was just holding him. You spoke about this in your book too. I've got depression and it comes back here and there. And so I was feeling a little depressed. And I always hold my spoon to just remind myself kind of the power of what our minds can accomplish. And I put that on Threads and I got 25,000 views and 50 people calling me a liar. And I had to limit the comments. And
oh my God.
It was a little bit crazy. This was yesterday. And so I had gone out to get an Archangel Michael candle and some salt. I have a magical practice and do a little bit of protection work on my house because I'm not used to this much visibility. So I went out. I'm on my way to get the Archangel Michael candle, which I've already had a lot of synchronicities with this form. And I see an Archangel Michael dashboard sticker on someone's car in my neighborhood. I'm like, okay, great. So I go to CVS, get the little candle, got the salt, came back. And I'm like, no, I want to go on another walk. I think I want to go get some brick and hammer it down so I can really give myself some protection about to enter Scorpio season, whatever. Doing all my witchy stuff. Go out, get the brick, and I put it in my little satchel, and then I'm almost home. I live at the top of a hill, by the way, and I'm walking. So I've already been up and down the hill. And I'm like, no, I kind of want to go get a beer for some reason. Like I had a gut feeling. I was like, no, let's go to the store. And in my mind, I'm like, ooh, that gut feeling. I'll probably see an owl. I'm talking to Mike tomorrow.
And listening to on the earbuds.
Listening at the same time. And I'm like, I bet you I'll see one if I go right now to the store to get a beer. And then I'm walking. And there's a family ahead of me. And I was like, damn it, there's a family on the street. I wish I was alone because this is where I would want to see an owl. I'm like, the whole time. And the family passes and the owl takes off from the telephone wire, flies in front of me behind the family onto the top of the tree. And I'm like, oh my God, there's no way. I'm like, that's had to be a hawk. And I'm like, it was totally silent. And so I looked and I zoomed in and I see its little its
Little ear
little
tufts.
ear tufts. And I'm like, wow. So I sat there and I took video for a long time. And I said to him, I said, I'm gonna go get a beer. I'll be right back.
Oh, you said that to the owl?
To the owl.
Yeah, okay, okay.
And I went to the store, I got my Modelo, and I came back and he was not in the same tree anymore. I'm like, dang. So I was looking around. And then I was about to take a picture for my friend to show her which wire in my neighborhood that I had seen him on. So I was digging for my phone and in the exact same spot on the way home, flies over my head. I see his belly and lands on the wire again. And then as I'm filming, a second one comes up and then they both fly off. So it was like it was a pretty gnarly. I've never had an experience like that. I've had a pretty crazy one that I'll tell you about later. That's has to do with some hypnopompic, maybe hallucinations, maybe
Hmm.
alien contact stuff that happened to me. But anyways, that was last night. And then you saw two.
That's and I saw too, but I gotta. So it was in a place where there are a lot of owls, and I
Yeah.
will occasionally see an owl there, but it was a nice sighting. It was like there was. I was listening. I had my earbuds in, and I was listening. It was just the news, I think, and then I kind of heard a hooting owl, and I took the earbuds out, and I could see in the forest where it was, and I hike in this park every day. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to follow this noise. And I followed it, and I kind of said, it's going to be back there. And the trail looped around, and sure enough, there were two owls in a tree. And I watched them for a couple of minutes. They were like, I couldn't get, I'm in the Pacific Northwest where the undergrowth is just like the ferns are thick and the moss and so I couldn't really it would have taken some work to trudge through there. And it was getting dark. And
Yeah.
so they were pretty far away, and I got a picture, but it's not much. But there were definitely two great horned owls making the exact same hooting noise that your owls were making, which is the normal call. And I think this time of year, there's like owls are very territorial, and so sometimes they make more sounds than other. And so I'm not sure if it's a seasonal thing or something like that, but it was
Yeah.
almost the exact same thing. So I had two owls, and there was a third owl that I could hear off in the forest, but I never saw that one.
Wow. Yeah, I've been hearing three lately. I usually hear one or two kind of one goes and the other goes, one goes and the other goes. And
Yeah.
lately I've been hearing three. So I've been expecting to see them. I've been looking for them and stuff, but it was really cool. Um, so yeah, let's get into your book. I'm so happy to have you here
Oh,
so
thanks,
so
thanks. Yeah.
quickly after finishing it. Let's get into maybe the confirmation event and how owls entered your life and took over.
Ooh, okay. So the confirmation event was in 2013, and how owls entered my life was really 2006. So 2006, I went camping for. I can tell the story quick, or I can tell it.
Take your time.
Okay, so I just did a podcast with Kristen, the woman in the book, and we've remained friends over the years. But she and I met in 2006 in this little town in Idaho where I was working for an outdoor school, and I had been up in Alaska all summer long, and I got down to the lower 48 in right around this time of the year. It would have been early October, probably a little earlier, maybe so early October, and I met this woman who was in town, and I kind of said, "Oh, you've been here all summer long. This is right next to Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Park. It's real camping culture." And I said, "Oh, you must have been camping all summer." And she said, "No, I didn't camp once." And I said, "I'll take you camping." So I took this complete stranger camping, and we walked in with very light packs. So I've gotten in at that point in my life, I was so on fire to do this ultralight backpacking stuff. So I was like, okay, we're leaving everything behind. We're going to go as light as possible. The weather's beautiful. We're not taking a tent. We're going to sleep on the ground and and she was like, great. So we went for it, and we can move really fast. We had sneakers on, and we got deep into the mountains. We left into the afternoon, and in a few hours, we were way deep in the mountains. And we're both sitting on a big flat rock. I'm making dinner. I'd been outdoors all summer long, so I was completely in my element and cooking on a little camp stove. It was funny. I just did a podcast, as I said, like I wanted to hear her side of the story. And I mean, I'm sitting there, she's talking, I'm listening, and I get this moment where I'm like, oh God, this woman's much smarter and there's much more depth to this woman. There's like a spirituality I did not expect on this
Wow.
trip. You know, like you meet a stranger and then all of a sudden you're having like the big conversation and like,
Yeah.
wow, this is really, I did not expect this. And it was at that moment that one owl whoosh, flew right above us, and then a second owl, and then a third owl. And for the next 2 hours, as the sun was setting, these owls flew around us. They landed on tree branches near us. We were in bear country, so we had to move. We didn't. I don't want to eat where I'm sleeping.
Hmm.
A little teeny camp stove and just a little pot, and so everything fits in a little stuff sack. So I just put everything back in the stuff sack. After we ate, we walked another half mile. The owls followed us. We found a beautiful spot in a field of wildflowers to lay out under the stars. And we set our pads down. Actually, she forgot her pad. I did not realize that at the time. She told me afterwards, like, "Oh, I didn't have a pad last night." I'm like,
I've
so
been
we
there.
talked. Yeah, we talked about that in the thing, and it was like almost a spiritual experience for her. So these owls were like swooping right over our faces, and for just a half a second, the light or the stars. Well, you know what it's like to see a trillion zillion stars. So this is high elevation in so no light pollution at all. It's astounding. So the next morning we get up and we walk back to town, and I kind of say, that was great, let's do it again. She says, let's do it again. And so 4 days later we go back into the mountains, to a totally different part of the mountains. And this time it was colder. We had a shelter with it. It was a tarp. And so we set the tarp up, and it was just kind of that gray, kind of like, oh, let's hike up to that hilltop before the sun fully goes down, and then we'll be warm. So when we climb into the sleeping bags, we won't be cold. So we walk up to the top of this hill, and the sun sets, and boom, 3 owls appear around us. Now, before, 4 days earlier, they were kind of off in the distance, and this time they were one of them landed at our feet. And I talked about this with Kristen, and I just did this podcast a week ago, and I talked with her, and I said, she had this like total like look of like just astonishment, and it was like, to have it happen once was pretty cool, but to have it happen twice was like positively mystical.
Yeah. Anomalous.
Now, what I did not talk about at the time, and now I can't shut up about it, is in the moment of seeing those owls, I had a voice in my head that said, this has something to do with the UFOs. And it's happened both nights, both times. Now I'm looking at what I am absolutely. There's this thing called a screen memory. You can get into that if you want.
Yes. Yes, we will.
So you get it. These are little 10-inch owls. They're what's called a short-eared owl. It's a pretty common kind of owl, and so they're like 9-10 inches tall, and they're doing owl things, and they're landing, and like these were owls. And then, but the voice in my head said, this has something to do with UFOs. Now, it could have been my own kind of internal knowledge that I knew that owls, I didn't invent this owl thing. Owls show up at paranormal moments, and,
Yes.
and other people have recognized this and written about it. I'm the one that kind of went crazy on it and sort of gave my life over to it. But, so I got totally wiggy, where I kind of got so obsessed, and I kind of lost my mind. So I was doing two things. I was at that point in my life, I had been reading UFO literature for a number of years. And in my youth, I had a handful of experiences. And as a young adult, I had some experiences that sure pointed to UFO contact. Like, I was not going there. Like, I wasn't going to go there. At the same time, I was like voraciously reading these books, and I was like, oh, that sure sounds like what happened to me. But no way, didn't happen, couldn't happen, not me. No way, wasn't going there. I was like, and then I see these real owls, and I have a voice in my head that said, this has something to do with UFOs. So I do two things. I start researching owls. Like, what's the totem meaning of owl? What's the mythos of owls? And then I also start looking into my own contact experiences. And I started a blog in 2009. So that was 3 years after the event. Kristen had moved out of the valley. She was back in Michigan, I think, where she grew up. It's where I grew up. And she And the first blog post I wrote, actually, it was the second blog post on my blog in 2009, in March of 2009, was this story, Owls at Sunset, exactly what I just told you. And in that story, I say, Kristen was talking about something when we saw those first owls. So like the article was up and I was like, you know what? I'm going to call her and find out. So I called her up and I said, what were we talking about the very first night when we saw the very first owls? And she said, oh, I remember exactly what I was talking about. I was giving my deepest, most heartfelt definition of what God means to me.
Oh.
And so that took this already mystical experience. Like I'd been like obsessed for 3 years about owls and UFOs. And so, and also the mythology of owls, excuse me, the mythology of owls, as well as sort of the deeper mythos of the UFO contact experience. Like right from the beginning, I was like tapped into that kind of more consciousness side of things. And and so this already mystical event got tipped over into like this transcendent thing. So however nutty and obsessed I was, I just got so much more nutty. And so I wrote about this on the blog, and then boy, my blog initially, all I wanted it to be about was synchronicities, because I have a lot of them, and synchronicities are tidy, and they make a great blog post, right? You don't have to
Hmm.
overthink a synchronicity sometimes, and so and it felt like the universe was like boom hammering me to to do the UFO stuff in the blog, and so I started, and it just was like my life unraveled. And this was the more interesting part of the podcast, where I was talking with Kristen a week ago, and I would say I say this when I give talks and stuff. Like I don't shy away from the fact that like I spent like between 2006 and 2013, I spent 95% of my waking hours wondering if I had gone insane. And she was like, "Oh yeah, that was you. Oh yeah. Well, I was worried about you. You were coming unglued." And it's like, "Yeah, that's how I remember it too." And so she confirmed like what I already knew, but it's like this thing where you just like the years go by and I'm like, "Am I overtelling this story?" And she's like, "No, no, no. You were so obsessed. It was like it was tough to be in the room with you." So, um so I started a blog, or really early on in the blog, the owl stories started showing. The second blog post was about owls, and then the UFO stuff, and then all of a sudden I was writing about my own experiences, and I was getting so many synchronicities. And then people started sending me, in 2009, people started sending me their owl stories, their owl and UFO stories.
Yeah.
And at first it was just sort of a trickle, and then it just turned into a deluge. And and the books and just being a guest on podcasts, it has. So what happens if you Google UFOs and owls? I am the first thing that comes up. You can do it right now, and then I'm like the
Yeah.
next 25 things under that. You're doing, yeah. So
I'm
I'll
doing
be.
it.
It's like I'm all like it's. You're gonna find me. Anywhere in the world who has a UFO and owl experience co-joined is gonna find me in about 2 mouse clicks, and then right at the top of my blog, right
The,
at the
the
top of
AI
my
even
site.
says, yeah.
What does the AI say?
The AI says the connection between owls and UFOs is explored in several books and discussions, notably by researcher Mike Clelland.
Okay, so there, yeah. So even,
Yeah.
and that's not. I understand why that's there, because it's like I'm getting about one story a day lately. It ebbs and flows. There was a point when I was getting about six a day. And I think that's just some popular YouTube video just rises to some
Yeah.
part of the algorithm, and then I'm just flooded, and then it tapers off, and then some. But anyway, and so, all of these stories are remarkable, and it's not just UFOs. So, oh, and there's no UFO. I haven't talked about any of the UFO stuff. The only UFO that showed up in the story so far was the voice in my head when I saw
Right.
those real owls, which to me counts, right? I don't
Yeah.
need a real UFO. I mean, I'm totally open to people who have an owl experience and then someone rides their bike by with a big UFO T-shirt. That counts
Yes.
in my. Some researchers don't like that. They're like, you're not a real researcher, and I'm like, well, so it's not my job to make the real researchers happy. So, okay, so that was the dawn of all of this, and that's going back 19 years. 2006 is 19 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So how did UFOs start coming into play?
Oh well, so Whitley Strieber in his book Communion, the owl shows up right there. It's right in the first few pages,
Yep.
and later on in the book he writes about owls. And then his second book was called Transformation. I think it was called Transformation. So he did three kind of he did confirmation, transformation, and breakthrough, I think, in within a few short years. And there's a lot of owl stuff in those books. But I printed it all out. I cut and pasted it, printed it all out. It's not that much. It's probably two or three typewritten pages. And it's right there. He talks about the mystical qualities of it, the mythic qualities of it, the ancient properties of it, the seeming synchronistic qualities of it, the communication qualities of it. So I had read all those books in sort of, so that was in my subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I could have parroted back cleanly those 3 pages. So it's very, very common for people to see owls in conjunction with the UFO sighting. It's more common that they come first, but that's not true. That's not 100%, but it just seems that's more the pattern. Yeah. So I get stories of whatever, somebody's on a camping trip or walking through the forest or driving down the road and they see an owl and then they turn a corner on the road and then there's a flying saucer hovering above the road.
Yeah.
There's a woman who, I think I got to do this. So she was young woman driving. She sees a flying saucer, right? And it's like classic flying saucer seen from her car. Then she drives a little farther and she's on a bridge. And I think I've got this right. There were the posts on the bridge. There were these freestanding posts on the bridge, sort of. And there was a series of owls all lined up. So as she drove, there was one owl on one post and another and another. And I think there were 4 owls altogether on 4 posts. I think I've got that right. But that kind of story shows up in my email inbox pretty much every day. And it has since 2009, 16 years, sometimes 6 times a day.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm the gatekeeper of this, like this fringy little corner of, and like I don't want these stories to just be trapped in a file cabinet. I want them to be alive and vital and shared. And so I'm doing my best to tell these stories and put them in books and such. And so fast forward a little bit, in 2015, 10 years ago, which hurts my brain to think about, I published the book The Messengers. Mm-hmm. And that was where I made my argument that owls and UFOs are connected. And it was a bigger book than it probably should have been. It's about 400 pages. But I really wanted to do my very best to like explore it from every possible angle. Richard Dolan at the time was the editor of the book, and he was the publisher initially. He gave me the rights back. He's no longer doing much publishing business anymore. And he was, basically I said, this book might be too long. So that's fine. No one's ever really covered this subject, so you got to cover it thoroughly. So, if you just finished it, like I worked really hard to like see it from every angle. And that book is full of stories. Like I'm telling some of my own stories. There's a lot of my own stories in there, but a lot of it is just these stories that arrived either in my email inbox or people I talked to at conferences or and on and on and on. Yeah. So there's no lack of, I've never done a proper count, but there must be hundreds of stories that get retold in that book.
Yeah, it's fascinating. How do you sort of equate the sensitivity, the hypersensitivity that owls have in order to hunt, their incredible hearing and sight? You mentioned in the book that the reason why maybe they are sensing UFO contact or attracted to hypersensitive people is because of that sensitivity that they have themselves. Can you kind of go in a little bit into
yeah,
more of that?
Actually, it's interesting. I love that chapter.
Yeah.
I know, but I don't know if it really, I don't know if that really plays out.
It really stuck with me.
So owls are remarkable. The owls have remarkable hearing, much, much better than, and they have, they can see at night. They can see in what we would call complete darkness. So, and and so they do this hunting. So the mouse in the forest floor makes a little noise on the forest floor. That noise has a certain signature that the owl's ears are uniquely tuned to hearing. So the owl flying in what we would call complete darkness in the forest, right? So in the forest, moving between trees, between branches, in what we would be unable to see, the hand in front of our face, the owl can fly freely in the forest at night. And they're listening. So they're flying in flight, listening for a noise, for the sound a mouse makes in the forest duff on the forest floor. So they are uniquely positioned to hunt at night. Now, Jacques Vallée, I reached out to him. I reached out to everyone. Oh God, I was shameless. I've sent letters to every single person. I tried to get I reached out to every researcher I could possibly. So I was not going to skimp on Jacques Vallée. He was tough to get a hold of. So I finally, I had to send him a paper letter, and he got back to me, and I said, do you have any accounts of owls and UFOs in your files? And he sent me this wonderful account, and it was, I've since recently met him in person, and he retold that account, which is funny. And I don't know how much research you're doing, but if you start doing research, you're going to meet people, and then years are going to go by, and you're going to meet them again, and they're going to tell you the same story. And it's so interesting to hear the same story after years have gone by. So he essentially told the story exactly the same way. He did tell me that it was police. There were police, gendarmes were. So these police are driving at night. They look up. Oh, excuse me. And all of a sudden, bloop, out from the sky plops an owl, and the owl lands on the ground, and the owl's flopping around like it's discombobulated and confused, and then they get out of the car and they look at this owl flopping around in the middle of the road, and then they look up and there's a flying saucer right above them. So Dr. Vallée speculated, he can't know, but he wisely speculated that perhaps there was something, some energetic force, some vibration that we can't tap into easily, that disrupted the owl's ability to fly. And if they have super sensitive ears, maybe it was something in like a sound frequency that we can't hear that disrupted the owl. So I worked on that. And then if you did, like if the aliens did want, here, I'll tell you, this is to tell these stories, you go all over the place. So I met this one woman, and she had what very clearly sounds like a UFO contact experience, missing time on the side of the road. And then she comes to and all of a sudden she's parked miles away from where she should have been, didn't know where she was, had to find her way back onto the highway. And then later she had these experiences where it felt like her ancient shamanic ancestors, like a whole team of ancient shamanic ancestors were communicating with her. And they said to her, we want you to go to the tea aisle at the grocery store, and we want you to pick up every box and read the back of the box. And so she went to the grocery store. She picked up the box and she looked up and, like ginger leaf, spearmint leaf, chamomile leaf. And she could hear this whole legion of her ancient shamanic ancestors going, oh, oh, oh. And the implication was that they were in some realm where they could not do the purely physical sort of sensual thing of drinking a cup of hot tea. And it was just this really, I loved that story. So,
gosh, makes me emotional almost.
Oh, it's a beautiful story. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. She told it wonderfully. Yeah. So it's interesting. They said, shave your head to this woman. And she shaved her head. I don't think there's a lot of women you could kind of whisper in the ear, shave your head. And they go, that's a good idea. I'm going to shave my head. And I said, did you? And she said, yeah. She loved it. It was this really, so anyway, these stories are, nobody's talking about this stuff in those congressional hearings, right? Nobody's talking about the person who has a UFO contact experience and then starts reading the tea aisle, reading the back of the box in the tea aisle to her ancient shamanic ancestors. But that's what's showing up in my files.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the implication is that whether it's her ancient ancestors, there's a blurry line. It's just all blurry to me. And so where does the UFO occupant begin and where do our ancient shamanic ancestors end? So the implication is that the UFO, I could tell more stories. We'd be here for 10 hours, but the UFO occupants, if they had the ability to see through someone's eyes, which sure seems like they have that psychic or technological ability, the one animal that would be most perfect for their needs would be the owl, right? It could see in the dark. It's got a great eyesight. It could land in the tree way over there, look in your window, and hear you fine because its ears are so highly tuned. So it has remarkable night vision. It has remarkable listening capacities. And it's also like not really that uncommon. So like if you saw an owl in a tree, like, it's not, you don't see it every day, but the alarm bells shouldn't go off. Mm-hmm. So if the UFO occupants were trying to spy on the abductee, the owl would be the perfect like organic drone.
Right.
Now I say that, and now it's like another 10 years have gone by since I kind of pounded that one out into the word processor, and I kind of think it doesn't play out as cleanly when you look at the big scope of reports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm convinced that the owls are arriving for some mystical reason, but I don't think they're doing the bidding of the UFO occupants. I think it's much more synchronistic and much more like a totem animal,
right?
Yeah, than like a agent of the UFOs.
Yeah, it seems like it's a little bit more subtle, right? Like they both kind of exist on this subtle plane, and so that's why they're able to interact.
And it's so subtle, I got to say that it drives the nuts and bolts researchers crazy.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, I just talk about this airy fairy. Well, you could kind of look at it from this direction. You kind of look at it from another direction. And here's a story that I can't quite. So here's a story that's not in the book that doesn't have. I tell more stories without the UFO lately, but here's a story that I love. I can tell it quickly. That's part of the reason it's so. A boy he grew up in an Indian reservation in Michigan. Now I grew up in Michigan. I didn't know anything about this reservation. I looked it up. Sure enough, there's a reservation. I think it's a Huron reservation. It doesn't look like much. It looks like a neighborhood in the Lower Peninsula of Michigan. And but he was, as a 12-year-old boy, he was flying a kite, and he loved this kite. And the kite he was flying it in a field, and then something that had never happened before, the kite, like, and the ball of string got pulled out of his hands. And so the kite and the ball of string like fly into the sky, and he watches them kind of fall into the forest. And so he gets a friend and he said, let's go find my kite. So they go into the forest, and then they see the kite up on the top of a tall tree. And then they walk to the tree, and at the base of the tree is an owl that's all wrapped up in the string. And they get an adult, and the adult comes back, and they get his scissors, and they cut the owl free, but the owl's been injured. So they nurse the owl back to health, and they release it. And when he told me this story, I said, are you a shaman? And he said, oh man, in a word, yes. And I don't want to say too much, but he told me some stories that, like, it sounded rough. Like the role of the shaman takes its toll on the practitioner.
Yeah.
And that would be, so the reason I asked, like, are you a shaman, is because of all the stories I get. And there's like this shamanic element to these things, and a little boy on an Indian reservation having that experience. Now that to me sounds more like a dream than a real life experience. And that's what I'm finding woven into some of these experiences.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's kind of this liminality. And you mentioned too in the book that when a person sees an owl, it's like, yes, we're just seeing a bird that of course you might see in the area that you live, but it always, always, always feels meaningful. Like it
Mm,
always feels like it carries some weight. And it's always happened at a time to me that something profound is going on in my life. Um, you know, I think that the archetype of the owl being, either uh, a warning sign of death or a bringer of wisdom or having some type of really deep meaning in all cultures throughout time is significant.
mhm,
Um, because like you said in the book as well, humans understand in symbols,
mhm.
which, you say now maybe the owls aren't, sent from the the uh the UFO inhabitants, but maybe it's an easier way for us to process something grander that might be happening. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I think they are being sent from the universal unconscious archetypal powers that like are welling up everywhere and are interwoven into everything, just waiting for that powerful moment to intersect. They're talking about big grand philosophical ideas and stuff like that. Oh yeah, so the owl as an archetype. So the archetype by definition, actually it's tough because I've asked a lot of professors and philosophy professors and stuff like that. I ask what's an owl, what's an archetype, and everyone's got a different meaning. So
Mm.
it's but I would argue that it would be we all in our bones, in our DNA, have a knowledge of certain things. What's a hero? What's a mother? What's a crone? What's the role of the owl? It's embedded in us. And so when people have these experiences, I get a lot of stories where people like say, "Oh, an owl landed on the fence in the backyard." It was such a majestic moment, and I was just full of awe and reverence, and it was just a total blessing. And that's their story. There's nothing there. I'm like, so that is part, and I'm certain ancient man felt the same way in the presence of an owl.
You also mentioned that a lot of these stories that you get with owls and with owls and UFO contactees, a lot of them are women. Um,
So this is, I think women communicate differently than men. So I
yes.
think women are just more likely to reach out than men.
Mm,
And so I certainly get more from women, but I don't think women are necessarily having more experiences. I think women just communicate differently and want to like tell their story,
that makes
where a
sense.
man just is like, blows it off and keeps it to himself. And
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's also that feminine lunar quality too,
hmm hmm
the um that feminine intuition they say, and even in hermeticism, the sun is inherently male, the moon is inherently feminine, the day is male, the night is feminine. So
yeah,
that
Zeus has an eagle, and oh no, I'm drawing a blank in her name. Athena has an owl. So yeah, so we're um, there's in the man would be the ego, right? So Zeus is on a mountaintop, with the eagle in the bright sunlight, and the women gods are usually in the forest, kind of hidden away, and working with, yeah. So and then and the moon is almost there's a really commonly the moon is depicted alongside of Athena and alongside owls. So owls and the moon, totally understandable. Owls at night. That's the moon is symbolic. So the moon has a 28-day cycle, 28 and a half day cycle, and that reflects women, and so there's this yeah, it's a very feminine archetype.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'll get into a little bit about my owl experiences
Oh,
since
please,
we're,
please. Yes.
yeah. Like I said, I grew up in Canada until I was about 18. After high school, I moved out to LA about 20 years ago now. Um, Never saw an owl when I was visiting my dad in the Canadian Rockies. I'd never seen an owl in my life. The first time I saw an owl was in Los Feliz. Um, I was living in like a new build sort of building. Um, and it was the year just the first few months after I lost my dad. My dad was 56. He died of cancer, and it was super traumatic. It was during COVID. We didn't get a funeral, and I talk about this a lot on the pod because my dad's
Hmm.
death was kind of a catalyst for a lot of my own regeneration of my own psychic abilities and a lot of profound change. You mentioned there's a checklist of people that have had either contactee or profound owl experiences, and that's the shaman's path, initiation, life changes, messages from the beyond, and the thinning of the veil. And I check all those boxes.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, I was on the roof making a steak, I think, and having a beer, kind of like I would call it grilling with my dad. Um, and my dad died on November 23rd. So I think it was a 23rd. I should have looked it up here exactly the date, but it was a 23rd, just a couple of months after dad had passed. I was grilling and an owl swooped down and landed right in my eye line. I have a video of it and it was profound then. Um, and that was the first owl I'd ever seen. It was just a couple of years ago. Now the really crazy one, um, bear with me because
Hmm.
I've only told Daniel this and it's pretty strange, although it does have some connection to the psychedelic therapy that I was doing to cope with my depression and intense grief and PTSD. I started ketamine therapy,
Oh,
which has been
oh,
insanely helpful,
oh. Keep going. Keep
really
going.
phenomenally helpful. Not only for my mental health, but for my intuition. I call it going into the void. I know you had a little chapter on psychedelics as well, and people have different names for kind of crossing that veil into that that space. But I I've got a lot of really interesting experiences that I've had with the ketamine therapy already. But normally I would do them in the morning. Um, and at the time, this was about a month after, actually. I don't know why my UFO sighting always s- like it's always skips my mind. I'm like, oh yeah, I had seen a UFO a month earlier. I saw a UFO out of my window right here, at Silver Lake, 3 days before I had met Daniel for the first time,
Hmm.
who has had a lot of UFO contact from his own backyard. This was my first time ever seeing one. Now, my dad had seen a UFO and had told me about it when he was still alive. It was, and I've heard this before, three green dots in a triangular shape
Hmm.
that he had seen, and then they spun off into a circle and spun off into the atmosphere. And I never forgot when he told me that because he was like, nobody fucking believes me. And my dad was not a woo-woo type, you know?
Hmm.
Distinctly remember him telling me that story. So couple of days before I shared my sleep paralysis experience on a live pod for Spectre Vision and met Daniel and Elijah for the first time, I saw a UFO. About 3 weeks later, um, after Daniel had asked me if I wanted to start a podcast, I had told him a bunch of my other kind of paranormal experiences. I had done a ketamine therapy, but at night, before bed, because I was working at a restaurant and I had to kind of squeeze it in. Um, I was feeling a lot of doubt around this project, a little bit of apprehension and fear, and I wasn't sure how I was going to parse out any of these stories
Hmm.
and how far I wanted to dive into the mystery. And it was just seeming daunting. And so that's why I had this ketamine experience. I was like, please let me get some clarity around what I'm supposed to do here, what my role is here. I had the experience. I went to sleep, slept for a full 8 hours, ketamine wears off in an hour, but
Hmm.
2 to 3 hours, you're completely back to normal. That's one of the best things about it. So I slept the full night and I got hardwood floors and like a yoga ball chair. It's like a yoga ball inside of a chair that is in my room. And I woke up just before the sun started coming up, and my yoga ball chair had made like a circular shadow in my floor. And I'm awake for sure, just staring at whatever this shadow on my floor. And all of these like small little shadow figures started coming out of the hole. They were about hand size and
Hmm.
kind of shape. And sometimes they would go humanoid and they'd have little legs and arms. And I'm a dancer. I was a dancer for 15 years professionally. And they started moving kind of like I might move, kind of doing modern dances.
Hmm.
Oh, it feels crazy to say this. And kind of like I have like a Lavoie air purifier. It was going all in my air purifier. There was probably six, seven, eight of them crawling all up on my gas heater, making itself flat, going underneath, and then kind of like knocking on stuff. And like they didn't have faces typically, but then sometimes they would have teeth and they
Hmm.
biting on stuff, trying to tear things open. And this went on for maybe 15 minutes. And I eventually just like put my pillow up. I was kind of like laughing in a way where I was in disbelief. I'm like, what the fuck? I just turned over and put my pillow up and I think I was able to go back to sleep for a little bit. And I woke up and I found the video at 5:59 a.m. and I have a window behind me and I look out the window and a massive owl swoops in, lands on that tree, and stays for a month and a half.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and he was my friend. This is his feather.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He left me a little feather before he left. But I would say good morning every morning. I'd whisper, and he'd look, could hear me from inside. Um, and he stayed until the day that I quit my serving job and applied for disability. This is why I've got my machine. I've got a couple of herniated discs and I was
Hmm.
really suffering pain-wise. The day that I left my job, I came back to look for him and he was gone. So that felt really, really profound. He was here for so long and it was just like an hour maybe after this really weird hypnopompic experience that I had with the ketamine therapy. So I'm wondering what you think about all.
So, so you had a psychedelic experience,
Mhm.
and so I'm like, it's not my, I'm not really a dream analyst in by, so it's not, it's your dream. It's your, now let's say it's your experience,
Yeah,
and it's your,
I was
you
awake. I
called
was
it,
definitely awake.
yeah, yeah. So I kind of caught myself when I said dream. I look at real life as a dream at this
Yeah,
point, or as a movie, or I like I'm totally at peace with taking a half step back and trying to like
yeah.
shake things up by
My eyes were
looking.
open. That's all I
Yeah.
know.
So but the fact that an owl showed up in conjunction with that. Now, if the owl is in my second book, so I did here. I'm going to read something. You know what? I'm just going to read this right from here. This
Yeah,
is from my
sure.
second book. So you had an owl experience. So what does it mean? People ask me that all the time. Like, what does it mean? What do the owls mean? I'm like, oh, geez, like it's like asking what does God mean? That's like, so like, well, how do you answer that? So again, why owls? On a purely intellectual level, I don't know. Yet my gut feeling gives me a glimpse into some possible answers. Here are 4 ideas on what owls might mean, and each are followed with a question. Number 1, owls are alarm clock. The simplest answer would be they are here to wake us up. But wake us up to what? So if you had like, you had this experience and the owl shows up and like wake up, pay attention. Number two, owls are an archetype. We talked about this one a little bit there. Yeah. They are a symbol, an image stored deep within humanity's genetic memory bank. It goes on a little bit. We talked about that. I would just be saying what I said before. And then here's my favorite one. Owls are here to announce initiation. An initiation is a ritual. A young Catholic receiving the Eucharist during their first Holy Communion. Oh, excuse me, like someone receiving their first Holy Communion. Owls often seem to show up just before the arrival of a UFO, as if to announce an impending ritual. Religious scholars would argue that the initiation rites are metaphoric of change within the initiate, but the true believer wouldn't see the initiation as a metaphor. The change would be entirely real, but an initiation into what? Number 4, owls are the totem of the transformational experience. Seeing a UFO can transform someone. I've spoken to a lot of people who've seen strange craft in the sky, and in that moment, their entire definition of reality is altered. I've also spoken to people who have had owl sightings at such highly charged moments that it transformed their lives. But a transformation into what? So, just this is like this, you were talking about this amorphic thing. How do you pin it down? So, you had a psychedelic experience, which by its very nature is beyond we don't live in a psychedelic universe. So when we're confronted with something psychedelic, it's like tapping into another dimension in a way. Then you have an owl, which in my opinion is the totem animal of that other dimension. And so if it's here to announce initiation or to play the signpost or the totem of the transformational process, like the proper question would be, well, how did your life transform? What happened leading up to the event? What happened after it? So
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's funny because I knew what it all meant somewhere back in my mind when it all happened. I was asking, is it safe for me to explore the unknown? You
oh
know? And then the beings were like, we dance just like you. And then the owl said, okay, and also I'm here.
oh my gosh, that's perfect. Yeah. So
And
your
then I
question
left my
was,
job and then it left. And I said, okay, so I'm just going to pursue this podcast.
that's your new job.
I didn't plan to have a podcast. This all sort of came to be.
Mm, mm,
And I was
yeah.
a bit scared. And they
Well,
were like,
as you should
don't
be, as
worry,
you should be.
girl.
You're stepping into the unknown.
Yeah, they were like, we're cool too. Come and hang with us. That was the vibe that I got, you know, until I didn't want it anymore. And I'm like, okay, enough, guys. Um, and that I have not seen an owl since that day until last night before the night before I talked to you.
Yeah.
Of course, of
So
course, of course, of course.
you were at this precipice. You knew you needed to change. Should I change? Should I follow this new path? Should I cut off my old path? Should I start my new path? And that should, I mean, it would be great if we were all like happy-go-lucky and just like, isn't that easy? Like, yeah, I'm just going to change my life and start this new thing. That's spooky. It's scary. So usually that comes with a lot of trepidation, and it's a true challenge. But so that's another thing. The owl is the totem of a challenge, and a challenge is not bad, right? So a challenge might be hard work. It might be scary. It might be a lot of hard work, but it is not necessarily bad.
Yeah, and their presence is sort of comforting. It's like, you
It
know,
depends. It depends. There's some folklores, and you go talk to a Navajo,
oh,
yeah, and say
yeah,
the owl is comforting. They won't agree. Or
that's true.
there's parts of Africa where owls are seen as very very ominous, but I don't see them as ominous. I do see them as a tough teacher or a tough messenger.
Mm. That brings me, I missed something. So I had seen the owl in 2021 and I had had this experience with my little guys. In between that time, um, I live in this beautiful little apartment and I had a neighbor that lived downstairs who had lived here for 35 years. older Jewish guy, really, really funny, really cynical. I'd go down there for tea. We'd have a really nice time all the time. Loved my neighbor. The only other time I saw the owl, it might have been the same owl, I'm not sure. He was in the tree during the daytime, same tree, and had been found dead in his apartment.
Hmm.
That around the same couple of days. So the owl as a death warning resonates as well because he was sitting right up there and I was staring at him and then we got the news that he had passed away in his apartment. He was quite old. Uh, but gosh, that really stuck with me as well.
There's a chapter in The Messengers called Owls and Death. The folklore of the owl in almost all of the world's tradition is a harbinger of death. Like it's even in Shakespeare. There's in Macbeth there's an owl hooting and then that foreshadows the death of one of the characters. Also in Julius Caesar. No, in the Roman play. I think it's called Julius Caesar, the play. Mm-hmm. So and then but that's not what I'm finding in my files. Mm-hmm. What I'm finding in my files is that owls often show up after the passing of someone. And I wrote a novel and it got published 2 years ago. And everyone said, you got to write a sequel. I'm like, I'm not writing a sequel. And they're like, no, you have to write a sequel. And then I was like, well, maybe I do. And the people kind of resonated strongly with the book. And I was like, well, I'll write a sequel. And I've been working for so long and I can't get it. Like I got it. Like I got this, I'm procrastinating in some way that I can't, it's not logical. And then, so the other project that's been in my mind is to do a book titled Owls and Death. Just basically take the chapter from The Messengers and turn it into a book. And my goal in this, which I've always been very clear about, is that my nonfiction writing seems to have like a kind of a style to it. And I want to go more poetic, more playful, more creative with the writing style, more like the novel, more like the fiction novel, and write a nonfiction book more in the style of the fiction work that I did, but on owls and death. And I just made that decision fully this morning that I'm gonna put the part 2 of the novel in the back shelf, write this book, and so I was making notes just earlier this morning, just as you and I were emailing, getting ready for this. So, well, if you read that chapter, I mean, that chapter there's some stuff in that chapter that just, so what happens is, I'll tell a short, I got lots of stories, including my own mother. But I'll tell a short story a guy, his dad, he's with his dad falls out of the chair and he's dead. And the EMS people come and they take him to the hospital and he goes to the hospital with him and they said he had a massive heart attack. He was probably dead before he hit the floor. And so there's all these issues at the hospital with paperwork and he's there late into the night and it's emotional and tough. And then finally he goes to leave the hospital and the little mechanical doors open up and he steps out of the sidewalk and there's this little owl in the grass right along the sidewalk. And he looks down at the owl and he goes, "Dad, I love you. You're a great father. I'm blessed that you are my dad. I'm so appreciative that you were my dad."
You make me emotional.
I know, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. So that is the story that is showing up consistently in my email inbox. And I'm not asking for that story, but and I'm convinced that has been happening all throughout human history. I am convinced somebody's dad got killed by a mastodon and they stepped out of the cave and there was an owl there to greet them and they talked to that owl as if it was their father. I have so many stories where people's grieving is alleviated in the presence of an owl.
Yeah.
it is magic. We live in a world where we are told magic does not exist, but boy, sit with the files that are piling up in my email inbox, and you that that the stories that I'm collecting crush that materialistic idea of reality and who we are and how we're connected to deeper things, including birds in the spirit realm, and the richness of multidimensional experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very profound that I saw my first owl on one of Dad's anniversaries while I was
Mm-hmm.
grilling and having a beer. I haven't spoken to the owl like he is my dad, but my dad had a very distinct laugh, and it was hoo hoo,
Ah,
which I've made a connection with. Also the owl in my tree, again, it felt like it knew my dad. Maybe they were friends. Um, and then after last night, I came home and I said, "Wow, what a walk. Hey, Dad." I talked to him like that. Um, I mentioned I was a little depressed last week and I was reading your book, and then I was like, you know what? Let me throw it in the Audible and let me take a walk. I pressed play right at the point where you mentioned the name Christopher.
mm-hmm.
This is my dad.
Ah.
So that was
So,
really cool. Really, really cool. And really perfect timing because he tends to send me little messages when I start to kind of sink into the dark place, and I was feeling really rough and trying not to cry as I tell you this.
well, the my first experiences with owls are with Kristen. I
Yeah.
mean, so the like she was talking about God. So
Yeah.
someone with the first five letters of their name is Christ.
Hmm.
Like it doesn't get like it's like we're in a world filled with symbols and we ignore them.
Yeah.
I think it's just human nature to ignore them.
Yeah.
And I'm like I've turned off that filter. I've tried to. I still like and I'm like I see the world as a parade of symbolic events.
Yeah. And I think you had a few more Chris's in your book.
Oh,
It was the point where you said the name Chris, Kristen, Christian, any
Christina,
variety,
Christopher,
Christina.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And those will show up many times throughout this book, which affirmed me, a person who was starting to lose hope, that my dad's name is going to be repeated several times throughout this book, and so he is, in a
Mm-hmm.
way, guiding me through this journey as well. So that was really, really meaningful, Mike.
Mm.
Really, really cool.
Oh, so thank you. I've had my own, which I did not shy away from at all in the book, and I talk about it on podcasts and on the blog, and I'm like that I had my own experiences with severe clinical depression. I'm 63 now, and it hit me hard. And when I was 30, like like I wrote a little 9-page essay a few years after the event, and I have had therapists read that, and they kind of said, "Oh, it's a surprise you're still with us." So it was bad, but I so after I got out of so the depression thing, it was like PTSD. Like it took me years of hard work, and I was I couldn't I didn't lock it up, man. I talked about it.
Hmm.
I purged. I was and I I watched. I would sit at a table with other people. There'd be a handful of people at the table, 5 people at the table, and I would tell this story. This would happen to me. This would happen to me. And then you could see everyone at the table, like I had crossed a social norm. Like I was
Mm.
not allowed, you're not supposed to talk about this stuff. And you could just see everyone was uncomfortable. And then what would happen is one person would come up to me and say, my wife has this, and there's no one she can't talk about it. Or I've had this, and I can't tell anyone. So you told me so that I recognized that right away. And then I was like, well, I'm going to talk about it. And if people are uncomfortable, like, well, too bad. And I'll, but I'm going to reach the people that need to hear it. And then, so I had that experience when I was 30, and it was more around the point it was when I was 45, 50, when I started talking about so 10, 15 years later, I started talking about my UFO stuff, which I had suppressed, kept buried, denied, wasn't going to go there. And then it all flooded back. And I started talking about it online in a blog, and talking about it generated its own synchronistic storm. And then I recognized the same thing. Like, I tell these stories and it's not socially acceptable. You can tell people are,
Yeah.
and then someone comes up and says, I've had that experience and I can't talk about it. And so you are voicing what I cannot say. And so I started my blog in 2009, which is 15 years ago. In some ways isn't that long ago, but wow, a lot has changed in those 15 years. And what happened was I had a lot of people say, I started my blog where I started talking about my experiences. I never would have done it if you hadn't done it first. I was so inspired by you sharing your stories that I'm sharing mine now too. I have there's a long checklist of people who've told me that.
Gosh, Mike, I wasn't even going to bring that up until I heard you say near the end of the book that had experience with depression as well. I was like, oh, thank God I can bring it up. He'll understand.
Oh, yeah.
So
There's
that
this,
even that, that is huge for me. I wasn't planning on talking about depression at all in this podcast, but this this has given me a lot to think about, and I feel a lot better having shared that. So thank you.
happily. Yeah. Now it's just like there's a story. I wrote this down. There's a short little passage. There's little subheaders. There's a short passage in the book where someone reached out to me and said, "Oh, I went through a terrible bout of depression, brutal bout of depression. And the first job I had when I came out of it was I worked at a raptor center. This fellow was in Australia. I worked in a raptor center, and my job was to clean the owl cage. So I had to climb in the owl cage and right there with him. And I just was like, oh God, that is what a symbolic metaphor. Like I, in my rehabilitation chapter of coming out of my depression, I climbed in to a cage full of owls.
You did.
Oh, that's like, I can't quite pin down why that feels so resonant to me, but boy, it sure stings for me. Someone asked me, this was at a conference, like, oh, Mike, well, like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, like, I'm doing research. I've been doing research on this owl stuff. And I'm like, well, what's it all mean? Like, how's it changed you? And what's it make, and I said, I had to think for a little bit. And I said, I now live in a magical universe where the stories that I'm collecting, the stories that I've had the direct experience, just exactly what you've shared so far. These are stories that I think everyone has them to some degree. And I think a lot of us sweep them under the rug and want to ignore them. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, pay attention, treat these things as part of the human experience. But what I learned from the book, like, I kind of went into this book not really knowing where it was going to go, right? So there's somebody, you can go into a book knowing exactly what you want to write. This one, I was like, where am I going with this? So the book, The Messengers, a lot of those were blog posts. I had a great foundation. I had a great collection of stories from the blog, from a bunch of years of writing in the blog, and my own personal stories and people sending me stories. And then when I started that book, I was in a synchronistic storm. I can't tell you how many times I would be like, there just needs to be just the right story to finish this chapter. Yeah. And I would go to bed and I would get up the next morning and I would check my email and someone would have sent me the story that just dropped in place and just made it like solved the chapter just wasn't complete without just the right story, and that arrived. That happened so often that I just came to expect it. Yeah. So this book is like nuts and bolts researchers, very pragmatic nuts and bolts researchers, often men. I'll say that sometimes men are much more prone to fall into that category. They have a hard time with the book
Mm.
because it just, yeah, I just refuse. People like say, well, what do the owls mean? And I'm like, I can't say. I don't know. Like, it's a mystery. That was why I had to read it out of the book, because I kind of had to formulate my ideas. So this is not a standard UFO book. It's an exploration into more like an alternate reality that's playing along on a parallel track to us, that wants to intercede in our lives in a way to guide us to 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 transform us, which is part of, it's like an ancient, so the owl is an ancient myth playing out its role present day in conjunction with UFOs, which are what I would call a modern myth. So there's synonyms to me. The ancient role of the owl and the modern myth of the UFO are 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 on a parallel track.
Yeah. It's very apparent after reading this book. And it's a lot to parse and it's a lot to take in. Um, how do you, and this is just for me,
Mm-hmm.
how do you parse out this you know, I personally don't feel any responsibility to convince a skeptic, but how does belief factor in with your work, and your relationships? And how have you been able to traverse that? It's been a little tricky, especially since my post yesterday. And I don't like to over explain because these things, what I really liked that you said in your book, it's an exploration, not an explanation that we're
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
after. I just like to have these conversations. So what is your relationship with belief?
Well,
And
I'm not trying to change anyone's belief. I'm
right.
just trying to tell my story,
Hmm.
and I'm trying to tell us other people's stories. So I find that like um, like a like a prosecuting attorney, oh, he's got an end goal. He's trying to. I'm not a prosecuting attorney. I am a I'm a voice around a campfire. So all I am interested in is, so I just had this conversation recently. I'm interested in when you hear a really good story. Like an example, I've told this before, and it's everyone, that story of the young man walking out of the hospital, talking to the owl after his father died. That story leaves you with a feeling. I want to impart, like, a good story should leave you with a feeling. Even an open-ended story that doesn't really make sense, even stories that don't have like a nice, tidy story structure. And like the example would be the story I just told of the fellow who was overcoming depression and went into the cage of owls. Like, oh, that feels so. I feel that. I cannot explain what I'm feeling, but wow, I feel it. So you asked, like, like, what do you do to the doubters? How do you convince someone to believe? Like, I don't know. I'm not interested in convincing someone to believe. I'm interested in giving people that that unknowable feeling that only a good story can bring. And that's all I care about. If I can do that, then the rest will take care of itself. And I don't care if people believe. I don't like, right? I don't care if they treat my book as fiction. You can read a fiction book and have incredible emotional reactions. So I'm yeah, I'm not interested in the I just had this conversation recently too. I was like I'm not interested in talking to the technical specialists. I'm interested to talking. So I talk to a lot of people who have had their own direct experience. I don't talk to the researchers who've been at it for years. I do a little bit, but so I'm more interested in talking to the people who have had the powerful, emotional, direct experience.
Yeah, and I mean, it's already helped me profoundly, and I really hope it helps whoever listens to this. Sort of, I mean, it brought some color to my week. I was really in a place where, It's so funny as a synchronicities experiencer. When they stop happening, I'm like, oh,
Yeah, I totally feel that. It's like, what's wrong? What I do wrong? Like, like, yeah. So,
exactly where I was at. And yeah, I really I think that these stories are meaningful. I think that they are impactful, and I think that they're necessary to tell.
mhm. So if you're even a little bit aware of the UFO contact literature or the abduction lore, the aspect of screen memories comes up. Now it's owls show up as a screen memory. Now here's the story that shows up consistently. Someone's driving down the road at night. They turn a corner. There's a 4 foot tall owl in the road. And they're like, wow, that's a big owl. And then there's maybe the owl flies off, or maybe there's like a little lapse in time, and they come home and they kind of say, wow, I should have been home at midnight. It's 2 in the morning. What happened? And I've talked to hypnotherapists, a lot of them, and I say, wait, do you get owls in your stories? And they're like, oh, we get owls all the time. They're the screen memories. I'm like, well, what happens? And he said, well, we you talk to the people and you say like, okay, and they're under hypnosis. They're in like their hypnotic place, which nobody really understands what hypnosis is. So it's a mystery. So they're in this mysterious state of consciousness. And the hypnotherapist asks, describe the owl in the road. And the patient on the couch says, well, it's bald and it's got big black eyes and it's really, really skinny and it's got a tight, shiny spacesuit on. And I don't think that's an owl. And you hear that story 500 times and you're like, well, something's going on. So the implication is that the UFO occupants, most probably what we would call the gray visitors, the gray aliens with the bald heads and big black eyes, could be more. But that's kind of what, and I don't have a big spreadsheet of data. I don't have like a staff of assistants like helping me crunch the numbers in this data. This is totally anecdotal on my part. I would argue that it's like mostly the gray beings that are showing up as these screen memories. So you ask the UFO researcher, like, well, why owls? And they'll say, well, owls sort of look like the gray aliens, so that's why they use the owl. And I'm like, well, not really. They sort of do, but I mean, maybe a barn owl and a little bit does, but I would argue that the owl is showing up because of its archetypal meaning. That the UFO occupants, whatever they're tapped into, they say, we need a visual that we can put in the road. So I'm going to be standing in the road, the little gray alien, I'll be standing in the road. I'm going to put a psychic impression into the mind of the observer. They're going to be looking at me, but they will be seeing an owl. And then in the UFO researcher says, well, they kind of look like aliens, but that's I would argue that it's the archetypal power that they want to imbue the experience with. Now, it's not just owls, it's also a deer. So owl and deer are sort of vying for the top position of what shows up in the screen memories. And I feel pretty strongly I'm on the mark in this one. And that then below that are any number of other other animals, or so raccoons and squirrels and cats and firemen and clowns, so dead relatives, Jesus. There's all these things that show up, and so that but at the top of the list are owls and deer. Now, there's a friend of mine, a close friend of mine. She has an experience, I love this story so much, and she's told it to me many times, and I always listen. I'm like, okay, is this story going to change? What she is like? So I'm like, but it's very consistent, and she tells it better than I do. But so she was working at a school for girls, and this was in the backcountry, like camping, like in outdoor schools, like
Okay.
Girl Scouts, and so they had a team of girls at one campsite, and this is in the Northwest. So there was in the forest. So there's a campsite at one spot, and then just to get another flat spot, there was another campsite, but it was a little ways up the trail. So there's another campsite over here. So she's walking between the two campsites. She can hear the girls behind her. And so she's walking and she's on the trail and she turns a corner, it's broad daylight, And now she was in a position in her life where she knew she was having UFO contact. Even at 19 years old, she was well aware that she was having UFO contact experiences, but these would have been at night. And so she's walking down the trail, turns the corner, and there's this gray alien, gray being standing next to the trail. It is full bright daylight. It's white, creepy chalky white head, and it looks at her and she looks at it, and she says she hears this psychic telepathic voice in her head that goes owl, 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 owl. And it was, they were like locked in this thing, and she watched this gray being morph into an owl. And it turns around and walks into the forest. And so this is, I got another story like this where it's deer, where someone sees a five gray beings, and then they morph into deer, and they walk backwards around the edge of a house. And so these stories are out there. These are rare, but they're out there, and it's like, what? I don't know the mechanism of how it works, but whatever is happening, it must be easier for them to do it, because they just can do it instantly, it seems. But I love that story. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Wow. Well, thank you, Mike. There's again so much more I want to say. Are you open to coming back again
Oh,
for
absolutely,
part two?
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay,
this
cool.
is
So
like this is
we'll
like
call this part one.
great. Part one.
We're just dipping our toe in the water, I feel
Yeah.
like. I really, really, really appreciate your work and for coming on this podcast. I'm just starting out, and I'm not a researcher. I'm an experiencer,
Yeah, yeah.
all I know is my own experience. And
That's not true. That's not true.
well,
You read my book, so you know a
I
little
do.
bit. Yeah.
Now I
So
know a little more about owls
yeah,
and
you talked
aliens.
to Daniel Noah. You know
Yeah.
more than your own stuff. So
I'm
yeah.
a researcher now. And I love it. And I'm really, really grateful to be doing this work. And can you let everyone know where to find your podcast and where to find your work? I'll link it also in the show notes.
Well, my name is Mike Clelland, and that's in just how it sounds, Clelland. You can go to mikeclelland.com. That's kind of a hub and it'll take you to other places like the Amazon page, and I've got an art page, and I've got a podcast, and the podcast is called Hidden Experience, and that was the name of my blog. My blog is still online. It's a little
Oh,
like,
wow,
I haven't
cool.
kept it up. There's 1,000 posts.
Oh, I'm digging
And
in tonight.
so here, I'm going to do a little. This is this is the book you read. That came out in 2015. Oh, it's out of focus. Here we go. The Messengers. You know what it wants to. Here, there we go. I'll put it in focus like that. So and that came out in 2015. That was where I argued that owls and UFOs are connected. I had so many stories. I published stories in the Messengers 2 years later, and this is longer format stories. And then I talked about my blog. My blog was my coming to terms with my own personal UFO contact. I did it publicly in a blog format from 2009 to about 2006. And in that, I cover some of that in this book, which is my memoir called Hidden Experience, and that's the name of the podcast now. So my podcast is called Hidden Experience, and that's on the SpectraVision network, and it's easy to find. It's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all that kind of thing. And then 2 years ago, I published a novel, which is a mystery. Here, there. Oh, look at that! It does. If I hide my face, it gets into focus. The title is called The Unseen, and I wrote about. It's a story of UFO contact where I never use the word UFO, and I did that on purpose to try to. I wanted people to read that book and go, "Wow, this is a really interesting book," and not even know it was about UFOs. So
cool. I think I'll check that one out. Well, thank you so much for giving me a little slice of your time, Mike, and we'll have you back. There's so much more to go over.
Anytime.
Yeah, please enjoy your week. Enjoy the owls, enjoy your peace, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Good. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Bye.
Bye. And that's where we'll leave it for part one. You can find more of Mike's work including The Messengers and his novel The Unseen, linked in the show notes. Part 2 of our conversation drops next week. Before, I myself am heading to Mexico on Day of the Dead with medium Heidi Jaffe for a week-long retreat dedicated to psychic development. Stay tuned. You've been listening to The Aether, giving form to the formless. I now affirm the sphere dissolved and the transmission complete. So it is. If you've had a psychic, paranormal, or unexplained experience, you can call or text our listener line, The Void, at 323-332-1190. Follow us on Instagram at EtherPod, and join me at patreon.com/theetherpod. That's TheAetherPod for bonus episodes, guest interviews, ASMR, sound, tarot, and much more. This podcast has been brought to you by Spectre Vision Radio. Theme music by Late Life. Created, edited, and produced by Nicole Johnstone.